Thank you all for coming out at the end of the summer. So this meeting is focused mostly on what's going on with the Cranston Street Armory, but as always, feel free to interrupt if you have other questions, other things that you want to ask me. So I'm going to talk for a little bit about what's going on with the Armory, and then I'll take questions afterwards. ¿Está bien si hablo en inglés? ¿Está bien? Okay. Gracias. Pero excepto preguntas también en español. So basically what's been going on with the Cranston Street Armory, it's owned by the state, and it's owned by the Department of Administration. And the sub-department is DCAM, the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance. So these are the people who own all the state land, all the state buildings. They're in charge of managing all of that. And they've been trying to do something with the Armory for a long time. And this process has been going on for maybe about 20 years, and nothing has really happened so far. There's a new process that started about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where they're leading up to trying to give the Armory to a private developer to have a master lease for probably about a 30-year term, but it would stay, the building technically would stay in public management. Now, as I think some folks may be familiar, this means no property taxes. It's basically the idea is there'll be a private building, but because it's in public hands, technically, it won't be paying any property taxes to the city. So one of the things that's been very important to me is that we find some kind of city revenue. If this building is going to be privatized, if it's going to be a private building, Providence needs to have some revenue, because we can't always keep saying the city of Providence's budget is just something that we're just going to forget about. And that kind of thinking has put the city budget in a really terrible place. So this process has been going on, and there were a couple of steps in the process, and please feel free to ask me any questions if you're unclear on any of this, because it's pretty complicated but really important. The first part of the process has been to have what's called an RFI. And RFI is where you put it out and you have people come back with sort of vague ideas about what they're going to do, but they don't have to commit to anything.
No, that's a request for
information. So this is potential people who might be master leaseholders, basically. Basically, developers who are interested can come back. There were 4 proposals. The one I think that I got most comment on was the charter school proposal, which would bring in ACE, which is one of the virtual district charters, or district charters that has a heavy virtual component. So it is, unlike other charter schools, unionized, but it is controversial because of the virtual education component of it, which, as folks may know, was one of the things that in the Providence Schools report, Providence Public Schools were most excoriated for. So then it would also be the Wangari Maathai School, which looks like may not be opening because the John Hope Board decided not to grant a lease, so they don't have any space. So that proposal has been, I'm not sure if it will proceed forwards, but I heard a lot of opposition to it from people in the neighborhood. And then there were several other proposals. One of them was just sort of a generic proposal about which people might be good, but no real clear ideas on what to do with the building. Another one was an idea of putting gondolas, like ski gondolas, around Armory Park. The idea, it comes from sort of southern models of development in the South, and one of the ideas that people have basically is you have some sort of high revenue generating commercial thing that subsidizes everything else. But I don't think it's the right thing for the And then there was another proposal that was very, very bare bones from New York. And those are basically four proposals. Part of the reasons why we don't have many fully fleshed out proposals is that for a long time, no one has known anything about the building specifics. And if you're a developer, how are you possibly supposed to just sort of vaguely guess? I find one of the things I've been fighting for a long time is to get a cost estimate of some of the basic work, and just to open the drill hall, it's been estimated at $20 million. Now there have been previous estimates that have ranged as low as $3 million and as high as $5 million. The current working number is $20 million. What that means, though, is going to be highly dependent on what kind of ultimate code settlement comes out. So, the other thing is that people don't really know much about what the financials that the state might offer. And some people might be expecting hundreds of millions of dollars of public money, and some people might be expecting no public money. And exactly what that looks like is very hard. So the process is not set up to try and generate lots of responses. And the next step in the process is we're moving towards what's called an RFP, which is a request for proposals. That's the sort of formal privatization process. That's what you follow whenever the government sells off a private asset, contracts out to a private company to do something. That's the formal process. And that is starting in October, unless something changes in how the plan is working. And it's going to be a lightning fast process. It's going to open, and then the first step for responses is going to be like next week. So it's just going to go super fast. I've been very concerned about the schedule because it's a schedule that's set up to not invite anyone else to come in and get. And this is also the first time that the building details, technical details are being published. So I think it's a process that's set up to basically constrain us to not having many more bids. And I'm really, really worried that we're not going to get even one decent bid. One of the things I heard from when I was knocking on doors, I went around the area around the Armory, talking to folks about what's important to them. And one of the things I've heard consistently is people want public access. And again, if any of you here think that I'm mischaracterizing, I want to know, because I really want to understand what my district wants me to fight for. People want public access. People want some kind of something that will mean that the building is not just for people who have the money to get in, that it is a building for the entire West End, and not just for my constituents, but also for my constituents as well. And I think people also care a lot that it's a development that's in general one that's supportive of the neighborhood. And I think one that's supportive and works with the park. There are certain kinds of developments that I think with private commercial development may not go down the road that people want. So looking at what's going to happen, it's really important that we have some clear idea. One of the things that I fought for during this process, and I was able to get changed, the original plan was the selection process would be entirely secret. We would have these bids. It would be a secret committee. People would be sworn to secrecy. Anyone who knew about it would have to sign an affidavit that they would never disclose anything about the ongoing process. I was able to get the process opened up, so there will be public hearings in January on the proposals, unless the schedule shifts. But thus far, I've been taking the view that I'm going to work along with it. I'm part of the committee, I'm working with this to try and see if the process will play out and look like some sort of decent private development. But I'm growing increasingly concerned, I think I'm not the only one on the committee who's growing concerned, about whether this process will succeed and whether we're going to actually be able to come up with a decent private user. I'm worried that we won't, and that we might just give the Armory to some other private development that's not going to be good for the neighborhood. And I'm also worried that it potentially could lock us into something that's going to cost the state vast amounts of subsidies. I've been very concerned, as a lot of folks know, about the amount of money that we spend subsidizing luxury housing. And I really believe that there are higher uses of state money. So that's basically where the process is. And one of the things I'm really thinking about, part of the reason why I wanted to make this community meeting focus on this is, I'm really trying to think about whether I want to go in a different direction from just working with in the existing process and try and push for something a little bit different. And one of the things I've been thinking about is whether we should just do this like the Roger Williams Park Casino, which is where we're getting married on Sunday. And it's the idea of that model is that it's a publicly run event space. And I think you can do this by having a private event management company in there. But the idea is that it's a publicly run event space and that we can just open up the drill hall as a phased approach. And that's what a lot of the consultants, a lot of the process really pointed to, a phased approach making sense. But we've decided to not go with the phased approach and give the entire building to one private developer. Just open up the drill hall, and then the drill hall will be its own advertising. Getting people into that beautiful space will be its own advertising, and then we'll get a lot of interest potentially in finding a user for the towers and some of the space in the basement. And the great thing about that is that it doesn't commit us to anything long term, and it doesn't mean that we're just sort of asking some sort of private developer to just sort of sign something on paper without knowing any of the math, and then just ask the taxpayers to backfill later, which is how we've done a lot of projects here that have not gone so well. So that's basically what's going on. I'm sorry if this is like a bunch of technical details. It's really important, but this whole process can get very, very in the weeds. So I hope I didn't go make it too complicated and boring. But I think I'll stop there, and I will take questions and thoughts and, things that you want me to incorporate. Start with.
So 3 years ago in my leadership Rhode Island class, the Armory was our project, and we met with the Department of Administration a couple of times, and I'm surprised you even have a number 3 million, 20 million to fix it, because they repeatedly told us that those stacks were unfixable, and that's why you couldn't go into the Armory itself. I don't remember what that big part's called. We went and we did unofficial polls on Thursday night. They used to have music, and most people wanted inside. We heard a soccer field, we heard an indoor farmers market, things like that, like you said. And the other thing, there was a third thing I wanted to mention. Oh, and I was on the steering committee for the Armory, but they didn't really want community members because their meetings were at 10:30 in the morning when everybody works. I showed up at a meeting once and it was canceled, and they never told me, and it was a 2-hour meeting, and I had to take a half a vacation day, and everybody there worked for the state that was on the committee practically, so it was no big deal that the meeting was canceled. And then when they eventually did move the meeting times, it was only about when there was 3 months left of the RFP, and then they moved it to 4:30, so they don't really, I think they know what they're going to do.
I think that
Who they want, who they like, which developers is what I mean.
I'm worried about that.
Yeah, oh, me too.
I'm worried.
But I'm worried because of the stack issue that they're telling you can't go in, and they were always telling us they were afraid those stacks would crush, and that's why we couldn't use it, because of the stacks.
Getting a cost estimate was a surprisingly difficult thing. I felt like it was really essential because in order to do anything, you have to make sure you understand how to piece out the math. And getting some sense of what the actual costs are is really important. It is just a number, and it's not built on, a firm, crystal ball, but it is something that we can work around. I personally think that it's ultimately going to depend on exactly what the code settlement is. It's an old building. Old buildings are in every million ways violating Rhode Island's fire and elevator and life safety codes, and exactly how much it costs really ultimately winds up being heavily dependent on how much of those things you have to bring up to code. If you're going to be required to have an elevator that's large enough to have a stretcher in it, you have to rip out the entire elevator shaft, and it's very expensive. If they say you can just bring it up to grade, and so you can get a wheelchair in there, it's a lot cheaper. Those kinds of things are ultimately going to have a lot to do with the final cost. Yes?
If none of the RFPs seem adequate is there the option to turn down all RFPs, or once it's out, do they have to accept one?
Great question. Yes, they can turn down all of them. And there has been some discussion that that's probably what's going to happen. I am worried though if we get into a situation where there's no acceptable RFP, there's going to be a lot of pressure to pick something and just say that this is going to be good and we're just going to run with this. And I think that we also need an alternative that doesn't rely on magically having a private developer step in with the right plan. And that is, you can't always assume that the private market is going to come up and magically solve some sort of problem, especially if you don't do a lot of publicizing to bring in all the best private sector ideas, which I really don't think we're doing. So yeah, I think that we need a plan for if it doesn't succeed. I think it would be sad for us to just keep pushing out an RFP time after time until we find someone who comes in and, But we'll see.
And who has the final say on what's accepted?
Great question. So, technically there are two official points, but then there's one group of people who actually has all the power. So, officially this is a state properties lease, and it goes before the state properties committee. But by the time it gets there, it's going to be kind of a done deal. It will already be preordained. The real decision is being made by the RFP selection committee, which is a technical review committee and then a broader review committee. So it's a committee put together by the Department of Administration. But officially, because it's a state properties lease, it's done by the State Properties Committee. Likely speaking, it will need to involve, if it's going to be a private development along the current model, it will probably involve some sort of vast public subsidies, potentially requiring new legislation. And so we'll ultimately have to go to the legislature for the money part of it. Maybe. There are certain ways it could be done, I think, without new legislation, but I think that the Department of Administration will want to do it with legislation. Probably. Oh, and people should feel free to take the cookies I made.
By the way,
Oh, thank you.
I think what related to what my neighbor was talking about. About a year or two ago, I'm speaking as loud as I can in case somebody is.
Would you like this?
It doesn't matter whichever. Does anybody need?
yeah.
15 years ago, I was actually acting on that stage without a mic. Now the static and testing, 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing. Okay.
Look at that, Western do all these testing.
I'm trying to do about static. Okay, static one. And not really. About a year or two ago, there were consultants for the state, and I know they were also working for the city. And they came, most of the consultants were completely useless. The people up from Boston have had no idea how to consult with people in Providence, which is a common occurrence, like look at a RIPTA hearing. But, and then I think we got a much more satisfactory consultant who did organize various consultations, and there was a big presentation before the West Broadway Neighborhood Association and no doubt other groups. And there was a whole bunch of ideas, although they were not very concrete, about how you could maybe lease out the offices either to businesses or non-profits and keep the drill hole for public use. And I just don't know what happened to that whole process. It doesn't sound like it led to the request for information of request for proposals?
Well, it sort of did. So, and this is a really good question because the contractors, you know, as is common in Rhode Island government, a lot of how we do things is we have a contractor go and do the things instead of actually having public officials do it or, you know, public employees. This is sort of a fad in Rhode Island government, and it's a little bit weird if you come from experience in another state, but this is how we do things here. So we hired a consultant called UTEAL to do, among other things, a technical review of the building and to do a public process. I actually was quite disappointed in the consultant. I think that initially they really did no public engagement whatsoever and sort of forgot about that until we yelled at them enough that they did some public hearings, basically. I also have a number of technical gripes. If you read that report, and this is not super obvious, but it's a really big deal. They did not use Rhode Island codes. They just sort of, no. They guessed. They just took general national codes without actually looking at the Rhode Island specific code issues, which is like, well, and so part of the way they designed their ideas were like, you know, we are going to build 2 new towers in the drill hall to put in the bathrooms and the elevators that you need for the codes, or we're going to have to rip out the entire elevator shaft. And because they didn't look at using Rhode Island's rehab code, which is how you deal with those buildings in real life. So anyway, I think they did a poor job. I think we shouldn't have extended their contract, but this is how things go, and it's part of the way things work in Rhode Island administration. So yeah, you know, and I think during those hearings it was a little unclear what was actually happening, and their job was to try and sell the process to the community. So my job here, at least what I'm trying to do, is I want to tell you what's actually going on and not just try and sell this as this wonderful, amazing process that's going to finally solve this challenge.
So, I mean, what relation do the current requests or responses to requests for information, do they bear any relation to what was proposed to UTL by community members or?
No, I mean, you know, why would this? Because the request for information is what the private sector providers come in with, right? If you tell the, you know, UTL that it's not going to really inform what the private sector providers come in with. Like, I mean, a developer is not going to, because you tell a consultant for the state, there's no way that a developer is going to know, like, what kind of proposal from that. It's not like those concerns were reflected in the text of the RFI. We had I was not able to get any public access language put into the RFI, which I felt was like the most basic thing that I was hearing from community input. So yeah, I don't think it was reflected at all. Yes?
I think I heard you say that the real power about the decision-making is an administrative group that's selected by who?
Ultimately,
The RFI committee?
well,
no, the capital...
State Providence Commission or the
it's a
capital
mix.
access and
Ultimately, in all administrative matters, all power flows from the governor. But in practice, it's Michael DBH, the director of the Department of Administration, who's administering this project. And I do want to thank him. He's helped me on a number of occasions improve the process, you know, among other things. You know, he was the guy who got it so that it wouldn't be a secret process. So I was able to convince him that that was a bad idea. And so he's listened to me on a number of occasions. I really want to thank him for that. And to other people as well. But yes, there's a committee that's being set up. It's being hosted mostly by this administrative subdivision called DCAM, the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance. But ultimately, as with many decisions, it's sort of a distributed power structure thing. Because it's likely that they're going to have to come to the legislature asking for lots of money, that's where I and Representative Williams and Senator Quesada have a lot of say in the process. Because ultimately they probably will come and say, you know, we need $30 million Well, I think that there's a plan, and that may well be the plan. That may well be the outcome of the current plan.
Will be paid for.
I'm most concerned about the cost to the city, and this has been a concern that I have, raised primarily. I really think people see city taxes as like, a superfluous expense, like a luxury expense, like not something you build in as a standard basic thing. And I just don't think that's fair. Like, if many of you are taxpayers in the city, most of you all are taxpayers in the city, and if you're not, you probably pay for city taxes through your rent. And it's real, and these taxes are not made up. And for individuals, for residents, they're real. They should not be, something that we just sort of waive for developers. There needs to be some kind of city revenue if it's going to be private development, I think.
Well, they haven't been paying property taxes up to this
No,
point.
because it's a state development, but if we make it a private development, that's where the biggest amount of money comes in, because it's a valuable building, and no Providence property taxes is a lot of money, because Providence has quite high property taxes. On top of that, they'll probably ask for direct state cash. The proposal that was closest to having things priced out would have no taxes and would have come, I think, roughly with about $60 to $70 million public money from the state. So, that, and I think the math works there, but that's a lot. And I'm hoping that we could do something with less public money where the state could get back some revenue, and I think that would be a better approach, because we can't just pretend like, we can give all our money away to certain private developers.
So let me ask you a question. If they only need 22 million, why would we give them 60?
That's what's needed to fix up the drill hole.
Oh, okay, fine for that.
If you want to go put something else really fancy in there, then you need a lot more money.
Oh,
That's for a more basic thing. If the way you start getting to a lot of money is you put in a lot of stuff. And that also is not the cost of running the building. It is a very large building and with large heating costs. And, you gotta pay for those.
I was told it cost the state $500,000 a year just to keep it open.
Well, that is roughly true, but there are also some secret budgetary line items. So the $500,000 is what gets paid for in what's called RICAP money. But then there's also a $750,000 line item that's within the Department of Administration budget, which I actually only found out about because they made an error in the budget. And so it's within these big blocks. There are a lot of things in the state budget that are just giant numbers and you don't know exactly where it is. But in this case, there was an error made in the state budget a few years ago where they mistakenly put the Armory in the military staff budget instead of the Department of Administration budget. I know budgets are very exciting. You should have seen the turnout at my state budget community meeting. So yeah, there's another $250 million line item.
I'm a little,
Yeah.
I'm a little confused as to how the RFI relates to the RFP. Is it that only the companies that submit RFIs are allowed to submit RFPs?
Good question. No, anyone can submit an RFP. The RFI is sort of a vague response, and the rules around it were very, very vague. A lot of people submitted what looked like pre-proposals or steps towards proposals, but it was technically fairly vague about what you had to put in. It was totally non-binding, whereas the RFP could be binding. And you could actually wind up with signing a binding contract at the end where you're contracted and compelled to do something.
And then, did you say that in October that you're only giving a week for people to submit RFPs?
I don't like this, but I have the draft schedule here, so.
Would there be an opportunity to extend that?
Well, I have been pushing to get it extended. I don't know if I will succeed on this partially because I'm going on my honeymoon during September, this decision will be made. But that's one of the things I want to change. Part of me is, wondering whether I want to work within this existing process. And that's part of really what I'm trying to figure out in this meeting. But It will be in October, according to this wonderful, beautiful schedule I have. It goes out to bid the week of the 7th, and then the pre-bid is the week of the 14th.
Wow. Oh, I didn't even know.
And then questions are due by respondents the next week, and then there is the formal bid opening 2 weeks later, or 3 weeks later, and then you get to the technical review 2 weeks later. And then there's a cost proposal review in December. The interviews happen right before the holidays, and then the public participation happens in January.
But what would happen, I mean, it sounds like a lot of things will have been decided and narrowed by the time there's a public participation opportunity. I mean, what would the public participation consist of?
Well, what won't necessarily be decided is if there's going to be a need for a budget request. So what is likely the leverage over that would be if they need to come ask for money, then that would have to come through the legislature. And if the proposal meets with a lot of public opposition, I'm not going to support it in the legislature, and I will try and get it killed in the legislature if they pick something really bad that people really don't like. If it's really great, I'll go champion and try and get the money.
What's the rationale for the contract being so squeezed when this has been years and years and years? It seems, on the face of it, ridiculous.
In my opinion, purchasing is done really badly in the state of Rhode Island. And this is kind of cookie cutter purchasing. It would make sense if this were not such a big, complicated project. Like, it would be a reasonable purchasing timeline if this were a smaller contract. If this were not something where you were just giving you all the technical information and then you got to start responding right away after that, it would be different. If we had given out all the relevant technical information months in advance, it would also be somewhat different. I think that this is just cookie cutter stuff, and I think that the purchasing standards in Rhode Island are not great. I also think that there's rampant violation of state law. For instance, people love doing these so-called public-private partnerships for finance, which as far as I can tell are not authorized anywhere, but people do them anyway. There was a state house hearing a few years ago where people said, oh yeah, we've been doing this for years, but there's no clear legal framework to authorize it. And like they don't follow there are a bunch of state laws that are not followed. The details are quite boring, but I think it's a mess, and purchasing often winds up being a mess. Maybe that doesn't answer your question. Yes?
Is the committee posting its agendas on the Secretary of State's website for Open Meetings Act compliance?
I don't know. It's not a public meeting. So I don't think it is required to follow the Open Meetings Act. It's an interesting question.
So it's considered like an administrative?
It's an administrative committee. I don't think it's a technical committee. It's not an official committee.
As far as I know, all committees are subject to the Open Meetings Act.
Well, if it's subject to the Open Meetings Act, then maybe it is. That's a really good question. One could look that up, and maybe one could see that the minutes are posted. If you like reading those things, you can go read that.
Is Textifield, does that belong to the Armory, or is that separate?
It is a great question. It belongs to the city, and the city owns the parking lot, probably. I've heard...
The parking lot isn't that big, so if there was going to be any big events there, they'd have to expand the parking.
Well, there's a parking lot inside the Armory.
Yeah.
There is, yeah. And the basement...
There is, actually. We parked trucks in there. It was in the garden.
Yes, so the Armory actually has parking built into it. ¿Es que alguien quiere hacer una pregunta en español? ¿Está bien? Okay. Any other questions?
Can you,
Yeah.
So aside from the Roger Williams Casino idea, are there other ideas that you've seen in other places that kind of give us an idea of successful outcomes for buildings like that?
There are lots of successful outcomes for Armory reuse. There is the Varnum Armory in East Greenwich, which is a little bit smaller. It is basically an event space. A lot of them wind up being some kind of event space. There's the Pawtucket Armory, which has a lot of event space and some art stuff that goes on there. It has some, I think, financial issues, but it is a reasonably successful model. Then there are some fancy Armory reuse models where people do like a large stadium inside it. There have been some public markets. There are a lot of different end-use models. One of the things that has not been super successful is sort of full-scale private development. That there isn't actually there aren't a lot of success models for that. Most of the successful models involve some kind of public space component.
Is the Armory on Benefit Street, how that?
Out by Risty, maybe? I don't know the details of that. I don't know the details, so no, I don't.
I mean, this is my naivete, because I'm relatively new to the neighborhood, only a year in, but, I would hope there'd be models where the people who want to make use of the space would pay a premium if they're doing well in service of funding the rest of the building. But I know that's a utopia that doesn't exist in the real world. But that kind of idea of using it to generate and then giving other people opportunities to make it a diverse, welcoming place for a number of different incubating ideas, I think would be refreshing.
So were you sort of suggesting that the monthly or yearly rent would be dependent on the house itself?
I mean, that would be just something that I ideate about, but I don't know if that's a practical approach to capitalism or consumerism, etc.
I think that works best if you have if you have a public management of the building, right? So if you can then contract out and then you make more money off the rent from some of those things. But if the goal of the building is to make profits, then that is less likely to be the case. Yes?
The film production studio idea that was kind of hot a few years ago.
Yeah.
It's completely done, yeah. Or
Unless someone comes back and bids a film production studio. I mean, if you want to submit a film production studio bid, please do. If you go through with that. But yeah, it's basically I'm also happy to take questions on other state issues if you have any burning questions about other state things, so that's always an option. Or complaints about things I've done as well.
More Armory.
Yes.
Kind of put this question in. How is it working at Hope RTC Village? Because that has multi-use there. It's not an Armory in Pawtucket.
Hope RTC Village is controversial in a lot of ways. Hope RTC Village has had a lot of really successful, great businesses there, but the finances of it are a god-awful royal mess. They have been delinquent on their city taxes for a long time. I'm not familiar with all the details. There are a lot of concerns from tenants about the building management. It's linked to a controversial LA developer, I think, who had a number of LA scandals, and I've heard from other building tenants that they're not treated particularly well. So, but at the same time, a lot of the aesthetics of it and a lot of the business uses of it are really successful. There have been big finance problems, though.
But that model could work.
I think it's a good model. I don't want to pretend that I love the finance model of not paying taxes to the city and
Well, I've wondered how much that building has deteriorated since it stopped being used regularly.
a lot.
Yeah, that's what I suspected.
When I was on the WPA board, it was 11 million to fix the entire building. That was 15 years ago.
How much?
11 million.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have heard a number of numbers, and they are very different. And there was the $11 million number, there was the $50 million number, there was the $3 million number. The new number is in the middle of the range of other numbers. I think that the $11 million was about sort of safe, warm, and dry fixes, if I remember correctly, and it didn't go in and solve all the code compliance issues, particularly in the towers. And that's where it gets potentially really, really expensive.
Is the city willing to give a lot of those codes up?
It falls to the state. It's a state issue. I mean, it's a fascinating public policy issue, although very complicated, but yeah, no, not really. I mean, we've been pretty harsh, actually, in Rhode Island. Like, our enforcement is generally, like, pretty tough. It is part of the reason why buildings are expensive to build, and it's part of the reason why it is difficult to do things with historic buildings. And it's not like it's a bad idea that we want safety standards. Like, fires are really, 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 really awful, and we really need to prevent them. But, you know, like, things cost money. And it's unclear. I think that there may be a new settlement now that there are sprinklers, because sprinklers often buy you a lot of fire code. But it ultimately is going to come before the Board of Fire Safety Appeals and Review. And what they decide will determine it. And, yeah, we'll see.
So I'm just curious, we have so many universities around here, and how much do they invest in Providence? I mean, like, we have Brown, we have Johnson and Wales, we have Rick. I mean, couldn't they help out with some funding of any sort? I mean, it seems like they would have a lot of money.
They do. I have to be careful here because I work at a university that will remain nameless on the other side of the city that has more money than the other universities and has been, well,
Okay, we got it.
but under the Code of Ethics, I have to talk about this all related to universities in general, not any universities in particular.
Yeah.
So, like, for instance, I had to recuse myself from the vote on the hospital conversions law because it had to do with what Brown was doing with the hospital industry specifically. But I was able to vote against the law that was promoted by Brown and a number of other universities to weaken labor standards for college students working on campuses. And so for this, yes, I think it would make sense for us to seek some kind of, partnership with the universities. The university should do more investment. But university investment also can sometimes be problematic, and there is a history of certain universities around the country, not saying anything about any university in Rhode Island, that have made investments in communities that have not always been for the best of the community. I think it's fair to say.
There's been most famous examples from Columbia in the late 90s stage.
There are a number of examples where university investment, and often people will sell the idea that investment is always a wonderful magical thing. Like, one of the big fights we have now is the Trump tax cuts for the rich through these zones in the state where you don't have to pay capital gains tax on unrealized capital gains if you invest there. So people are like, the idea is that big rich people investing in low-income neighborhoods is all going to trickle down and help all of the residents of low-income neighborhoods. But in real life, if you build like a high-end apartment building, it doesn't necessarily help in any way the residents who get the slice. And this is a big concern. And so people are like, oh, investment is always wonderful for the communities it lands in, but in real life, that's not always true.
And I guess the Armory isn't really close to any of those institutions of higher education.
There was going to be, one of the institutions of higher education had discussions about doing something there, but it fell through. Like 10 years ago, I think, according to gossip I've heard. Yes?
It seems like I don't know the exact name of the building, but the old power station that now has offices.
South Street Lane.
Yeah, thank you. Is like a similar building with similar challenges. Granted, it's in a really different neighborhood, you know, like you said, the Armory's not really close to any of those universities, but how did that work, like financially and logistically, getting a bunch of universities to share that space?
Vast amounts of public money,
Yeah.
basically. The details are much more complicated, and I know quite a bit about it, but basically it was just, you know, us, the taxpayers, making a contribution to economic development and helping support our universities, basically, is what happened.
Well, I mean, the reason I asked about the universities, because I'm from Ithaca, where Cornell University is, and there was a big, huge controversy about Cornell not giving enough money to Ithaca, and so they worked out some kind of deal where, you know, that they would invest more in Ithaca. So I just feel like, you know, the university should be more part of the community, that don't they get like tax breaks or something to?
Well, everyone says so in principle. The specifically controversial thing is universities own a non-mission essential property. Like when a university invests and buys like commercial property or a hospital, the hospitals do a lot of this here. The idea is like you should pay taxes if you're owning commercial property. People sort of think this in principle, but I don't really know how many people in the legislature actually believe this in practice. Like I was the only one to vote against the bill that exempted the Providence Country Day School in East Providence and all the woods they own behind there from taxation, which from, you know, municipal East Providence property taxation. I thought it was, you know, a wealthy school and has a lot of money and could afford to contribute something for their non-mission essential property. I really think that that's true, but everyone sort of, it's this kind of thing where people always assume it's not going to happen, so therefore it is theory, and nothing ever happens with that. Because ultimately there are court cases that protect a lot of these institutions.
I have one other way of looking at this, you know, the longer it sits there, the worse it's going to deteriorate. Something, and if worse came to worse, and they decided, well, it's too far gone, we'll have to tear it down, that would cost a lot more.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, I want this project to succeed. We have to find a way to open this building up and make it a center for, you know, for the whole city of Providence and the West End in particular, and, you know, the entire West End, and not just, you know, the area north, and also the area south. We need it to be a center for the community, really.
I mean, the problem is
gorgeous building.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, okay.
Well, you and I are both originally from the east side, and there's lots of centers there because of the schools and colleges there, but the only one I really know of is the Columbus Theater. You know, there really is no other joint community public space in this area that I know of.
Well, I mean, we were looking for a wedding venue for a while, and we were looking to try and find a large space, and we looked at them. There really actually aren't that many large venues, and I think that there really is a market niche. And I also would say that this is like a valuable thing to subsidize. Like, having a large event space can be good for the can be legitimately good for the entire city, and can be like something that there's a legitimate reason to spend public subsidy on. And I think it can be a legitimate public good that can help, you know, bring additional vitality to the city.
So who finances the Roger Williams Casino?
It is owned by the city. I think it is subsidized and loses money. It is actually quite cheap, and the cost is extremely reasonable for what we think is a really lovely space. So it's part of the talk about it. But yeah, it's quite cheap, especially if you're a Providence resident. It's really heavily subsidized by the city, and the city runs basically at a loss from by the park department.
How was the mayor able to have his inaugural ball in the Armory?
That is a good question. It was allowed, but DCAM has clamped down a lot of people The specifics, I think, have to do with the newer people at Camp who are a little bit harsher. I did a tour of the Armory or on a Quesada, and I did a tour of the Armory for our constituents, and we brought in about maybe 30 people from the neighborhood to come tour the building, and afterwards we were told that, we were not supposed to do that again. So.
West Broadway Neighborhood Association, specifically their Armory Committee, was conducting a couple of summers ago, conducting a very limited number of tours of the Armory. I don't know if they're still doing it.
No, so I really wanted to do a tour for my constituents. So that's what, I was able to convince them to do a tour, but I don't think I'm going to be allowed to do another one, unfortunately. I would like to. I think it's a gorgeous space, and it's really, really cool in there, and it has so much potential, and we are going to solve it. We are going to figure this out, and we're going to create a really great venue for the state. But it's going to require doing this right.
So what about the wedding cake house over there? Aren't there businesses in there? What are they doing over there that?
The wedding cake house is rented out to the Dirt House.
Oh, the Dirt House.
Which is an art collective based in Olneyville. They made a political statement I happen to like, but they have they spelled out no ban, no wall on their windows if you go into Olneyville Square. If you're coming down Manton Ave, and you see they're really right in front of you by the library. And they're moving in there, and they've almost finished renovating. It looks gorgeous.
How are they able to afford that though?
I haven't talked to Xander about the finances of it.
That's a big building to renovate too, so.
I don't know about the specific finances of that.
They use a lot of volunteer labor, and they're doing a ton of it themselves, and they raised a lot of money through various plans.
Yeah, I think I read on their website that Champion Foundation.
Yeah, I think a revolving fund.
Can the community come together to raise money to do the Armory?
People
grants or something?
I have to say, fundraising is my literal least favorite thing. And I have a bunch of scarring experiences of having to fundraise as a politician, so I hate constantly doing it. But it is, if people have those connections, they should bring them in. I don't know, the big institutional funders who bring in massive charitable dollars that would be needed, but that would be the kind of thing that would be great if somebody, some museum wanted to invest $200 million into the building and, sitting on some massive pile of nonprofit capital. But I unfortunately don't have the right friends.
Yeah. Is that good?
I don't know, we're a wonderful community here.
What?
Yeah, well, maybe that will solve the problem.
Who's the Joanna and Chip Gaines of Providence, Rhode Island? Get them in there. The people from Waco that basically sold out their property for low amounts, and they redid it all by themselves.
Well, maybe. Maybe. So, are there any other questions, or are there questions about other subjects? Yeah.
How long was the RFI open for?
The RFI is closed. There were 4 responses. I have the responses here.
I just wonder how long it was. Was it open for 2 weeks, 2 months?
It was open for longer. But the thing about the RFI that's different is that it was vague. It wasn't binding. So you could just whip something together. This is opening at the same time as we're releasing the building information. And then it's just boom.
Right. You said the pre-bid was about a week, but then there's a deadline that was a few weeks after that.
The way that the bidding process works is that there are a bunch of different steps in the bidding process. The first step is the next week.
Right.
So there's no period of several months when we put this out and we're going to go out and market it. right private sector partner who's going to invest and do something that's really great for the community, you gotta. It's not easy to find, you know, magical private capital. And, you know, that's not something that happens without a lot of work. And you can't do that work in a week. Certainly not in a market project.
I feel like most people would agree with that. Like, who do you have to convince to be able to sell that to the
DCAM. I think that we need a plan if this doesn't succeed. A plan that's not dependent on a private sector provider actually providing a solution. We need a realistic plan that would work. You know, it'd be great if we have this magical bidder who comes in and solves the problem. I would love that, but we need something that's not reliant on rolling the dice on this, I think. And I think that's essential. So I don't want to keep people too late in the summer, but if you have additional questions, you can come up afterwards and ask me some questions. I want to make, I think, a tentative announcement about my next community meeting. I'm doing these every month, the last Monday of the month. We alternate back and forth from here at Bell Street Chapel to Mount Pleasant Library. I have found by and large that people from Mount Pleasant don't come to these meetings and people from Federal Hill West End don't come to Mount Pleasant meetings, but please do come to Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant is a wonderful neighborhood. It is a lovely neighborhood. It is where I live, but it is a really lovely place. We should all come and experience it. And it's a wonderful library, and we have public libraries in a great state of disrepair, but you should come to Mount Pleasant Library.
I was going to say, I think the only time I've been in the Mount Pleasant Library was about 15 years ago. And it isn't, I mean, it's reasonably close to Eagle Square. It's not like it's at the top of the hill like Rick or PC. You know.
It's about a 10-minute bike ride from here. It is maybe a 20-minute walk. It is maybe a 25-minute drive with the new 610 development. But, yeah, so we're going to have it on the last Monday of September. I thought about moving it because it's the second night of Rosh Hashanah, but then we decided that since we're Jewish and realistically people aren't in services on the second night, it's mostly like you have a dinner and services usually end earlier. If anyone really would like us to move it to respect the holiday, you can let me know, and I might be able to move it.
Otherwise, we'll bring it out some honey.
Yes, we'll bring apples and honey.
I just have another standard question. Is the legislature going to meet in September? I mean, what was the
probably not
special session? The leadership isn't agreeable to that.
No, I mean, like we were talking about. This question is about something really important, which is the state lottery contract, which is a vast amount of money. It's been very controversial. The Twin River Casino and IGT are at war right now. There was discussion about approving this in a special session in September. I really don't think that's going to happen. I have heard nothing about it. You never know, but I think we probably won't come back early.
Maybe they're waiting for you to go on honeymoon.
Maybe they're waiting, but I also actually, because my fiance, soon-to-be wife, works at Hasbro on the Monopoly team, and because one of the other bidders for the lottery, one of the companies that has expressed interest were open to competitive bidding, is Scientific Games, and they have a license with Hasbro for licensed Monopoly. So because of this, I've had to request an ethics opinion about whether I'll be able to vote on this. I think I will, but it is vague enough that, like, for now, I'm not like lobbying my colleagues one way or another. So it is possible I'll have to recuse depending on what the ethics commission says. So just
So anything to do with Brown, you have to recuse yourself because you work there?
No, not everything to do with Brown. So to do with universities in general, then I don't. The rule is about whether it has to do with Brown specifically or universities in general. So I did vote against a piece of legislation that Brown was pushing because I thought that it was a bad piece of legislation. It was about getting rid of the 3-hour shift law, creating special exemption for college students. And college student workers are workers just like everyone else, and they should have the same protections. So I voted against that. But I had to recuse on changing the Hospital Conversions Act, likely to benefit a particular deal that Brown was one of the partners